It's pretty self-evident that life has got its rat's nest of miseries, and that's for sure. And maybe you could even make a categorical statement that life is mostly a rat's nest of misery. You could make a pretty powerful argument for that. But then there's a counter question, which is, well, what if you tried not to make it any more miserable than it had to be? Then what would it be like? And my suspicions is that I would suspect that most of that misery would go away, because it's the unnecessary misery that really brings you down. It's like, well, someone has cancer, it's like, that sucks. But it's not like you can say, if only we had done this differently, then that wouldn't have happened. But when someone's out like torturing you in a malevolent way, or maybe you're doing the same, you can always ask yourself, well, is this really necessary? Is it just like a useless add-on to the miseries of life? That's what disheartens people. And so even in your own life, if you aren't suffering from self-imposed misery, and you're only suffering from inescapable misery, maybe you could handle that, and you could survive, you could bear it, and even maybe without becoming irredeemably corrupt. So the goal would be, well, yeah, life is a rat's nest of miseries, and maybe it has no ultimate meaning. We could say that if we're feeling particularly pessimistic, but it still leaves one question open, which is, if you didn't do everything you could to make it worse, how good could you make it be? And the least answer is, well, it could be tragedy, but maybe not hell. And I think that's right. I really believe that. That's the most pessimistic, proper statement. The worst case outcome, in the worst of all possible worlds, is that your life could be tragic, but not hell. And that's a lot better than hell. And you think, I could give you an example of the difference. You're at your mother's deathbed. Well, that's tragedy. Here's another scenario. You're at your mother's deathbed and you and all your idiot siblings are arguing. Well, that's the difference between tragedy and hell. And you might be able to tolerate the first circumstance, and maybe it would even bring you closer together with your family members. The second one, no one can bear that. You walk away from a situation like that sick of yourself and sick of everything else too. And it's often the case that tragic circumstances bring out the dragons, because the stress is high and all those things that people haven't dealt with, they don't have the energy to repress, and all the bitterness comes pouring forward. So that's actually it's a rough lesson, but it's a good hallmark for figuring out whether or not you've got yourself adjusted properly and in relationship to your siblings. It's like, if you were all gathered around the bed of someone close who is dying, could you manage it? And if the answer is no, it's like, well, put your life together, because it's going to happen. And you should be the person who's there that can do it, and do it properly. And then maybe you'd find that it isn't the sort of thing that will undermine your faith in life itself. And I've seen both of those situations, ugly situations, murderously ugly situations. And then they're opposite, where people have had terrible things happen to them as a family, and they pull together and they rebuild their damn ship and they sail away. And so that seems to me to be a lot better. That's what you always teach people in psychotherapy. I don't care what sort of psychotherapist you are. You're always teaching them the same thing. You're not the plan. You're the thing that can confront the obstacle to the plan. And then when you know even further that the obstacle is not only an obstacle, but opportunity itself, well, then your whole view of the world can change, because you might think, well, I've got this plan. Something came up to object to it. It's like, it's possible that the thing that's objecting has something to teach you that will take you to the place where you develop an even better plan. It's a nice framework to use. It's like, are you so sure that this is a problem? Is that the only way that you can look at it? Or is it an opportunity? I mean, I'm not trying to be, naively optimistic. There are some things that it's pretty hard to extract gold from some dragons, and maybe the death of a family member is a good example of that. But even in a situation like that, I can tell you, it's an opportunity for maturation, that's for sure. And the thing is, you might say, well, it's pretty miserable to be digging for gold when someone's falling into the grave. Well, if they really love you, first of all, that's what they'll want you to do. And second, you're going to make their death a lot more palatable experience for them, if you're someone who can be in the room and be helpful instead of be, quivering in the corner and feeling that the entire world is collapsing in on you. I mean, that's another. You want to be the useful person at the funeral. How's that for a goal? That's a good goal, man. You know that you've got yourself together in a situation like that, because you're going to be at them. And maybe you want to be the person on whose shoulder people cry. That'd be a good goal. It's kind of, I don't like being naively optimistic. So when I tell you to get your life together, I'm not going to say roses and sunshine. That's pablum for fools. But it really is something to be the reliable person at a funeral. And you can aim at that. You can do that. And you got to be tough to do that, because it also means that you can sustain a major loss without collapsing. And that, you've got to be a monster to do that, right? Because you might think, and I've had clients like this, well, I love my child, I love my mother so much that I couldn't survive if anything happened to them. It's like, you have some serious thinking to do about that. You really want to curse someone with that kind of love, do you? I couldn't live without you. It's like, my God, get away from me. It's terrible. That's the Oedipal mother, right? That's like, I'll forgive you no matter what you do. It's like, really? No matter what I do, eh? You are not my friend. That's for sure. Not at all. It's a horrible thing to do to someone. That's the witch in the Hansel and Gretel story. All gingerbread and outside to the lost kid. Inside, you feed them candy and make them fat and eat them. Right, that's Hansel and Gretel. That's the Oedipal mother. That's one of Freud's major discoveries. It's a major discovery. The devouring force of love. You want the person to be able to stand on their own, and the price you pay for that is that you stand on your own. It's like, good to have you around. I'm glad you're here. But if and when tragedy strikes either of us, I hope that one of us is standing when it blows past. And that there's a harshness about that that's unbelievably cruel, because, you know, you say, well, if my mother died, I could live. Well, what kind of monster are you exactly? The death of your mother doesn't do you in? Well, it turns out that being a monster is the right thing. And that's a rough thing to learn. But it's necessary to learn. You know, because it also makes you, you know, at some point, for example, as you get older, by the time you're in your mid-20s, something like that, you should start having a relationship with your parents that's approximately one of peers. And you can tell if you have that. So here's a little trick you can use. So you have parents, obviously. They have friends. You probably care what your parents think, I would imagine. Do you care what their friends think of you? And the answer to that is, well, not nearly as much. And so then I would say, well, why do you care what your parents think of you then? They're the same people. You know what I mean? It's just luck of the draw that your parents are someone else's kids' friends. They don't think the same way about them that you do. That's where you see that you have a projection. By the time you're 30, if what your parents think of you matters more than what, say, a random set of their friends think of you, then you've still got your parents confused with God. That's one way of looking at it. You've still got them confused with an archetype, and you're still a child. And you might think, well, it's pretty damn rude not to think about what your parents think of you anymore, not to care. It's like, yeah, it's kind of rude, but maybe you'll be useful for them when they get old. And that's a much better form of caring. You're going to be independent enough and strong enough and detached enough so that when the power dynamic shifts, which it will, you'll be the person that can carry things forward. Well, you can't do a better thing for them than that. That's the best of all possible outcomes for your parents. When you're down in chaos and you don't know what the hell's going on, you have to rediscover the values that have oriented people forever. That's what you have to discover. So, for example, when I'm dealing with people who have post-traumatic stress disorder, and they've usually encountered someone malevolent, they have to relearn the description of good and evil. Because if they don't, they have no framework. They're lost. They think, well, there's malevolence afoot in the world, and I'm a prey animal, a naive prey animal for the malevolence of the world. It's like, well, good luck functioning under that set of assumptions, man. You just do not recover from that. You stay at home in your burrow. That's what you do. Well, you have to. You go down into that, you think, okay, well, malevolence is afoot. I better be the sort of person that can understand it and deal with it. And that's another reason why you have to transform yourself into a monster. That's the Jungian incorporation of the shadow. It's no bloody joke. Because the only thing that a monster won't mess with is another monster. And you might say, well, I don't want to transform myself into a monster. It's like, you don't have a choice. You can either be a pathetic monster, or you can be a monster with some power. Those are your options. There's no non-monster alternative. Weak or strong. And I don't mean strong like dominating tyrant strength. That isn't what I mean at all. I mean strength like functioning at a funeral strength. And that's a kind of monstrosity. And when you're down in chaos, that's what you have to rediscover.
In the age of social media, the search for information's been made easier. Not only can we find resources, but we've also got the people we'd like to learn from, just a click away. Jordan Peterson's made a great name for himself in both academia and pop culture. He's got many followers, and love him or hate him, the man's incredibly well read. Today, we'll be diving into 10 books he recommends everyone should read. Coming in at number 10, we've got Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Recounting his time in concentration camps during the reign of the Nazis, Frankl produced one of the most enduring works on the tenacity of the human spirit. His deep and thorough dive into what makes us tick makes this book a masterclass in how to take on life on your own terms. At the heart of the book is Frankl's concept of logotherapy. He puts forth the theory that it isn't pleasure we flock to, but a sense of individual meaning. Sound familiar? Yep. Peterson often brings up this point in his discussions. The idea is a simple one, but it's super powerful. Reading this book, you'll grit your teeth as Mr. Frankl reports the atrocities of humanity gone insane in World War II, but he'll pull you right out of it by sharing with you how he dealt with the whole thing. The writer's also a psychologist, so guess this makes total sense on Peterson's list. Next up at number 9, it's Effective Neuroscience by Jaak Panksepp. Simply put, the book's about the emotional tendencies found in mammals according to science. But we all know it can't be exactly simple if the University of Toronto's Professor Emeritus recommends it. But that's the beauty of this book. It presents a lot of very complex concepts very simply, focusing on where feelings emerge from and what methods we've got for understanding them. It reports scientific ideas in a very readable manner. Peterson called it one of the best books on the neuroscience of emotion. Explaining it further, he added that it contains separate chapters on phenomena we're all familiar with, such as sleep, fear responses, pleasure, anger, and social loss, etc. It goes a bit further and even gets into some of the subtle topics, such as maternal emotions. Well, sounds like it's got all we need to learn about the emotional components of our lives. We'd love to pick this one up off the shelf. Following this, there's Panzram by Thomas Gaddis at number 8. This is a tale of tragedy. Let's set the stage for the story. Panzram was born on a farm and breathed his last at the U.S. Penitentiary, Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, at the age of 39. In between those years, he saw a great amount of suffering and remained in prison for most of his life, starting when he was only 12 years old. Panzram's journey shows us a look into the ways a man can be needlessly cruel. The incidents are especially graphically reported, making one stop in horror. The author explores the sociological and historical content in the story too. During a lecture, Peterson talked about the book. A physician Panzram becomes friends with in prison encourages him to write about his life. He shared that his account of Panzram's life is unique because he explores the dark motivations that people can have, but he also lets you know exactly what he thought all the way through. Up next, the 7th spot, held by The Myth of Mental Illness, told by Thomas Sass. This book will totally change the way you think about the profession of psychiatry and its practices. It lifts the veil off of how patients are sometimes treated. Sass argues that sometimes understandable behaviors in people's lives are diagnosed as mental illnesses. This sort of makes them go, well, I'm not responsible. It's this problem I have. Surely it can't be as simple as that. There's gotta be some truth to people struggling with mental disorders. Well, you'll have to read the book to find out. The author also labels Freudian teachings as pseudoscience and presents the notion that psychiatry shouldn't be allowed to make its way into all the aspects of modern life. Peterson called the book a classic and suggested that if someone's interested in psychology, they should definitely give it a read. Moving on at number 6, we have Homer's The Iliad. This staple of classic literature is as important now as it was when it was first written. The work's centuries old and was written in about 800 BC. It's an epic story of revenge and war. Dr. Peterson recommends it if you want to understand human nature. He says if that's what you're into, you can't do better than Homer. Further on at number 5, we've got The Painted Bird by Jerzy Kosinski. This story is about an olive-skinned boy with dark hair who's left to fend for himself when his parents just desert him. Alone, he moves from village to village during the era of the Second World War. His journey's a harsh one, and there's rarely any comfort or care to be found. Through this character, the themes of adolescence and adult life are explored side by side. We're shown a world where there's just too much of everything that'll hurt you, hate, and violence. It's written with a tone that stirs the imagination to life. The tale seems like a myth being presented. It's just as important now as it was when it was first published. Peterson recalled that it is a terrifying book, and he shared that it's had a part to play in his overall intellectual development. Next, we have The Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Now, you've probably heard Dr. Peterson talk about this one. What you need to know is that it's a huge book. It's got a total of 3 volumes and was written in the time between 1958 to 1968. The author's Russian, and he was a Soviet dissident. Gulag is the word for the labor camps that existed in the Soviet Union. Solzhenitsyn provides us with a complete picture of the Gulag through his own experience in one. The book's amazing in its thoroughness. Plus, the author's famous for his larger-than-life reporting of Stalin's Soviet Union. Peterson's particularly fond of this title. At number 3, we've got Dostoevsky's masterpiece, Crime and Punishment. This is a book that's known worldwide as a tale of epic proportions. In it, we follow Raskolnikov, who's a poor student grappling with thoughts of nihilism and despair. But ultimately, the story's an eternal one, the fight between good and evil. Raskolnikov kills a pawnbroker and justifies it by thinking that she was contributing nothing but greed to society, so he can take the law into his own hands. Later, he's so overcome by guilt that he turns himself in and is sent to prison. The beauty of the story is that it explores human morality and its consequences in our lives. In it, we learn that suffering is a part of life, and that happiness just can't exist without it. Drawing from religion and philosophy, the book's a staple of world literature. Next, at number 2, there's The Red Book by Carl Jung. Jung's one of many influences that Peterson draws from in his intellectual life. This book's a product of the author's dreams and the experiences he lived through in them. The Canadian clinical psychologist called this highly unusual book to be a great help in understanding the human mind. Finally, at number 1, we have the Bible. Peterson said that the Bible should be read by all university students. He believes that it's a book with a very complex structure and that the themes in it are universal. He shared that the book can teach us a lot about human nature. So as Peterson puts it, read it and don't be lazy about it. Boy, that list will keep you busy for a long time. Dr. Peterson doesn't just recommend books, he writes them too. Here are 3 of his best ones so far. At number 3, we have Maps of Meaning, The Architecture of Belief. This book discusses how people from different backgrounds came up with myths so similar in structure. It's a product of Peterson's academic research into the matter. He goes on to explore what we can learn from the myths about our own minds and human morality. It's an awesome book that'll teach you a lot if you decide to read it. Next, at the second spot, it's 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos. This book is a 12-step guide to taking control of your life by finding your purpose and meaning, taking its content from age-old wisdom and literature. It's as insightful as it is comprehensive. If you want to get your life together, it's a great place to start. At the number 1 spot, we've got Beyond Order, 12 More Rules for Life. This work, it's all about finding a balance through scientific, cultural, and psychological causes of tyranny. Peterson warns us of falling prey to these forces. He encourages us to grapple with the following truth. Too much chaos makes us unstable, but too much order takes away our power too. So what can we do to achieve an ideal balance? Well, you gotta pick this one up to find out. We gotta walk a fine line between chaos and order, and Peterson's got the guidebook. That's all for today from our side. Have you read any of the books recommended by Jordan Peterson? Which of his books do you love the most? Let us know in the comments below. See you in the next video.
This is the Peter Pan story, roughly speaking. Peter Pan is this magical boy, and he's the boy that won't grow up, and he's magical. Well, that's because children are magical. They can be anything. They're nothing but potential. And Peter Pan doesn't want to give that up. Why? Well, he's got some adults around him, but the main adult is Captain Hook. Well, who the hell wants to grow up to be Captain Hook? First of all, you've got a hook. Second, you're a tyrant. And third, you're chased by the dragon of chaos with a clock in its stomach, right? The crocodile. It's already got a piece of you. Well, that's what happens when you get older. Time has already got a piece of you. And eventually, it's got a taste for you. And eventually, it's going to eat you. And so Hook is so traumatized by that he can't help but be a tyrant. And then Peter Pan looks at traumatized Hook and says, well, no, I'm not sacrificing my childhood for that. So that's fine, except he ends up king of the Lost Boys. in Neverland. Well, Neverland doesn't exist, and who the hell wants to be king of the Lost Boys? And he also sacrifices the possibility that he'll have a real relationship with a woman, because that's Wendy, right? And she's kind of conservative, middle-class, London-dwelling girl. She wants to grow up and have kids and have a life. She accepts her mortality. She accepts her maturity. Peter Pan has to content himself with Tinkerbell. She doesn't even exist. She's like the fairy of porn. She doesn't exist. She's the substitute for the real thing. There's a sacrificial element in maturation, right? You have to sacrifice the pluripotentiality of childhood for the actuality of a frame. And the question is, well, why would you do that? Well, one reason is it happens to you whether you do it or not. You can either choose your damn limitation, or you can let it take you unaware when you're 30, or even worse, when you're 40. And then that is not a happy day. I see people like this, and I think it's more and more common in our culture because people can put off maturity without suffering an immediate penalty. But all that happens is the penalty accrues, and then when it finally hits, it just wallops you. Because when you're 25, you can be an idiot. It's no problem. Even when you're out in a job search, it's like, well, you don't have any experience and you're kind of clueless. It's, yeah, you're young. You know, it's no problem. That's what young people are like, but they're full of potential. Okay, well, now you're the same person at 30. It's like people aren't so thrilled about you at that point. What the hell have you been doing for the last 10 years? Well, I'm just as clueless as I was when I was 22. It's, yeah, but you're not 22. You're an old infant, right? And that's an ugly thing, an old infant. So part of the reason you choose your damn sacrifice, because the sacrifice is inevitable, but at least you get to choose it. And then there's something that's even more complex than that in some sense, is that the problem with being a child is that all you are is potential, and it's really low resolution. You could be anything, but you're not anything. So then you go and you adopt an apprenticeship, roughly speaking, and then you become something. And when you're something, that makes the world open up to you again. You know, like if you're a really good plumber, then you end up being far more than a plumber, right? You end up being a good employer. Not that plumbers, I'm not putting plumbers down. It's like more power to plumbers. They've saved more lives than doctors. Hygiene, right? So, you know, if you're a really good plumber, well, then you have some employees, you run a business, you train some other people, you enlarge their lives, you're kind of a pillar of the community, you have your family. Once you pass through that narrow training period, which narrows you and constricts you and develops you at the same time, then you can come out the other end with a bunch of new possibility at hand. And Jung talked about that. He thought that part of the proper path of development in the last half of life was to rediscover the child that you left behind as you were apprenticing. And so then you get to be something and regain that potential at the same time. Sacrifice. You get to pick your damn sacrifice. That's all. You don't get to not make one. So you're sacrificial whether you want to be or not.
This video is sponsored by Blinkist. Reading books is great, but I've talked about this many times before. Many books are written very inefficiently and should be much, much shorter than they are. Not only that, sometimes you just don't have the time to read a whole book, or you might want to just go back and review the main ideas without reading the whole thing again. This is why I use and recommend Blinkist. It's a great app that takes information from the best books and condenses it to 15 minutes that you can read or listen to. For someone looking to learn, I really think this might be one of the best apps out there right now. I recommend starting with a summary for any book on the Fight Mediocrity Beginner's Reading List, or any of the books that are in my Blinkist library right now. If that sounds good, head over to Blinkist.com/fightmediocrity or click the link in the description below. You can give it a try for 7 days completely free, and if you don't want to continue, you can cancel at any time. As a Fight Mediocrity viewer, you'll also get 25% off if you decide you want the full membership. Thanks for watching.